Hey, from New Jersey, it's the SNL Nerds, the show where two comics from New Jersey nerd out about Saturday Night Live. I'm your co-host, Darren Patterson.
And I'm your co-host, John Trumbull.
Hey, John Trumbull, happy Superb Owl Day, good sir.
Yes, well, I mean, for the people who are listening to this, the Super Bowl is in your past. We are recording this on a Sunday afternoon, so it is in our future. We do not know what is going to happen.
Yep, we don't know which Super Bowl team whose colors are red and white are going to win and who have won multiple Super Bowl games in the past.
Right. Are you going to watch? I mean, neither one of us is a big sports guy, but I usually do watch the Super Bowl, if for no other reason than just to kind of stay connected to the mass zeitgeist of what's going on. I enjoy watching the commercials. I'm one of those people.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like, I'm one of those dorks that watches a sports game. I'm probably one of those guys that really big football heads hate because, like, they're like, oh, he's just watching it for the commercials and Usher during the Super Bowl halftime show. What a dork.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I am one of those guys. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing actually, not so much commercials, but as much as I am looking forward to seeing some movie trailers. Like, I know a lot of people are saying we're going to get a Deadpool trailer.
There's going to be a trailer for Deadpool 3, I understand. I'm sure there are going to be some other trailers from some other big movies.
Yeah, like I've heard the trailer for Wicked might show up tonight.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure they finished filming that.
Yeah, I haven't been keeping track of the Wicked movie at all.
And I heard we might get trailer for the movie a sequel to the movie Twister that's supposed to be coming out this year, which I totally
either right, and it's called Twisters.
Yeah, see, clever.
Yeah, okay.
Multiple.
Even though in the movie Twister they deal with more than one twister. I know.
Yeah, but this time they're definitely going to be dealing with more than one twister.
Well, I look forward to the inevitable porn parody Titty Twisters.
Oh my, sir.
Well, I mean, come on, the title's right there.
Yeah, that's true. You know what?
Look, I mean, if they don't make a porn parody by that title, somebody's not doing their job.
Come on, Brazzers, don't let us down. Right there. You got that reference too, so.
I did. I'm a horrible garbage person. Yeah.
Yeah. So Super Bowl is tonight. Like I like most people. I'll probably watch the game a little bit just because part of me does get excited to see kind of games like that, and I do enjoy the camaraderie, like you said. But like I think I probably would have liked it more if the Detroit got in it. I know a lot of people in the U.S. kind of feel that way too, because I think both these teams have already been in the Super Bowl before. I think that they played against each other, I think, like 4 years ago in the Super Bowl.
Wasn't Kansas City in the Super Bowl last year?
Kansas City has been in the Super Bowl like numerous years. Like Kansas City right now, they're at that point that like the New England Patriots were a few years ago, where they've won so many times and they keep winning that people are getting sick of it. Where they're like, oh god, these bastards again. Who cares? Like they're at that level now. But I'm pretty sure, like, if they didn't win last year, they definitely played and won the year before last. So that's where they're at. But, like, I was really looking forward to seeing maybe Detroit get into it, because Detroit's one of those teams that I know has been terrible for decades, and they've never been to the Super Bowl. And
oh, really? Okay,
no,
I didn't know that.
They've never been to the Super Bowl ever. And, like, this last year was the closest they've ever been to the Super Bowl in a long time, but they just couldn't close. So it's a bummer.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm sure that would be very meaningful to the Detroit fans if the team made it in.
Yeah, like I remember seeing like a bunch of Detroit celebs in the audience at games when it looked like they were going to get in. Like, you see Eminem or Bob Seger in the audience, and yeah. No, seriously, I saw them both in the audience.
I know, you just don't usually hear those two spoken of in the same breath. That amuses me.
Bob Seger, Eminem, and all your Detroit favorites.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Super Bowl, Superb Owl, it's happening right now. Football fever, catch it.
No, thank you.
You're vaccinated from the football fever. You don't want to do that.
I never triggered on it early enough, so I just never got into it. Football was that thing I'd occasionally see my grandpa watching, and I just never got into it.
Yeah, fair enough.
You
Fair
know,
enough.
raised by a single mom who didn't watch football, and then when she remarried, my stepdad didn't watch football, so I never watched football. You know?
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. There's a whole bunch of dudes that just ain't into it. Myself included.
Yep.
So instead of talking about football, we're going to talk about football adjacent episodes of SNL because
yeah,
we decided to talk about the episode of that was hosted by the late great Carl Weathers, who passed away not too long ago, and musical guest Robbie Robertson, who also passed away not too long ago.
Yeah, this is an episode from January 30th, 1988. This is season 13 of SNL, episode 10. So it's from the 87-88 season, back when our cast included Dana Carvey, Jan Hooks, John Lovitz, Phil Hartman, Nora Dunn, Victoria Jackson, Dennis Miller, and Kevin Nealon. And that's it. That's everybody.
Wow, that's it?
8 people.
Huh. But
I'm looking at a photo of the cast from this season, and I'm just like, this is adorable. Look at this, under 10 people in the cast.
Yeah, like if you look at a cast photo now, it looks like a high school class picture.
It's a mob scene, and I'm looking at a cast photo from this season, and it's just like, wait, that's it? Lauren has a much deeper bench nowadays.
Oh, the deepest of benches.
He does. I mean, I get why he does it that way, because if he loses somebody some week for whatever reason, he can afford to, and it's not the end of the show. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I was looking forward to seeing this episode too, because I think for both of us, this was the era where we were really getting into SNL. This is like late 80s. This was like our time.
It really was. Yeah. I was in my teens, and this is when I was really first starting watching the show on a regular basis. I could stay up late enough on the Saturday nights to watch the show. And gosh, I don't even know if my family had a VCR yet when this happened. We probably did, but I'm not 100% certain.
Right. Now, younger listeners, a VCR was a machine that you put a tape in it.
It was the DVR player of its day.
Now, a DVR player.
I'm so very old.
Just looking out for our younger listeners, man. Just want to look.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we are going to have to put a lot of this show into historical context, because it is just a time capsule of the late 80s now.
It really is. There was like a lot of, not a lot, but especially during Weekend Update, where I'd have to kind of go back and be like, wait, what was that referencing? What is that again? And I'd have to do a little research and figure it out.
Yeah. So should we dive in? Should we get into the show?
Let us dive, good sir.
Okay. First, for our cold open, we've got a sketch called Bushwhacked, which this was written by Bob Odenkirk, Robert Smigel, Conan O'Brien, Greg Daniels, and Al Franken. My God, what a pedigree!
Fucking all-stars, all-star team right there.
Yeah, and this is like when Bob Odenkirk, Smigel, Conan, and Greg Daniels, they were like the freshman writers on SNL, and they're like young guys, probably in their late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, but my God, just think of just that roster, that talent you just said.
Yeah,
mother of God.
Yeah, and this is this is January 30th, 1988. This is when George H.W. Bush was still vice president in the Reagan administration. He was running for president. He would be elected president that November, but we didn't. Of course, nobody knew if he would be elected yet.
Right.
Because anything can happen between January and November in a presidential election. And the big take on George Bush at the time was he was a wimp.
I remember that as a kid. Like people in the news were saying that, where it's like, oh, he seems kind of not a strong man's man, just a wimpy little boy.
Right. And which is such a weird take, considering that George Bush was the head of the CIA once upon a time.
Yeah, I don't know. People are weird.
But he came off real milk toasty, so I guess I see how that started. And apparently, this came right after Bush had a contentious interview with Dan Rather, where he was trying to prove that he was a manly man who could get things done.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks that that's like such a thing in our society where we need like a man's man to see them as being fit to be president. Like,
Well, I mean, as I recall, that was kind of what sank the campaign of who turned out to be Bush's opponent in the '88 election was Michael Dukakis. He had like two big things that sunk his campaign. Um, there was the Willie Horton thing,
right.
which the Bush campaign painted him as being soft on crime because it was like, oh, this prisoner Willie Horton got released early under Dukakis's policies, and then he committed all these more crimes. And then there was also Dukakis in a tank with a helmet, which, like, when he was making some campaign stop at an army base, he was like riding around in a tank, and it didn't look good for him.
Oh dear. Yeah.
And those were, and back then that was enough to sink a presidential campaign.
The good old days. Remember those days?
Yeah. This some bits of this episode made like 1988 feel like a million years ago.
It really did. Yeah, but so with Bushwhacked, so they take the idea of how people see George Bush as kind of a weak, ineffective thing, and they have him host a Morton Downey Jr. like talk show. Like, for those that don't remember Morton Downey Jr., he was basically like a talk show host before, was it Maury Povich and like the Jerry Springers of the world. Like, he kind of gave birth
he was
to
like
that.
our tabloid guy in the late '80s. I mean, he was, not as classy as Donahue or Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
He would chain smoke throughout his entire show, and he would just give these loud opinions, which he probably didn't believe much in real life. I don't know how much of his show was an act and how much it was the real him.
Yeah,
I feel like he was amping it up for the show.
For sure. Like, he was very combative with his guest. He were always like, wimpo libs like you make me sick. Like, shit that would lead to the Alex Joneses of the world.
Yeah, I remember him. He would just stride around. He had like a shirt and a tie, but no jacket. He has sleeves rolled up because he always looked like he was ready to, engage in a fight with somebody.
Yeah,
and he's chain smoking through. It was such a weird thing, and I think his show was syndicated too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I remember it was on Channel 9 here on the East Coast, like
right.
And yeah, a lot of people liked it. Mostly angry white dudes, of course.
Probably,
but,
yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of. There was a lot of him chain smoking and be like, "Yeah, you make me sick. I love America." And dudes in the audience be like, "Yeah, tell him Mort." Like, there was a lot of that shit.
Yeah, they'd encourage the audience to get really rowdy and aggressive. So anyway, so the idea of this sketch, we have George Bush proving that he's not a wimp by hosting a Morton Downey Jr. like talk show.
Called Bushwhacked. And I like how I also liked how, like, he gets the audience riled up, and then he goes to his wife, Barbara, played by Nora Dunn, and just violently makes out with her.
Right,
And as he leaves, it's like, "I'll see you later, woman."
Yeah, he gives her one of those kisses where it's like he kind of like pulls her head back and then just lays a big one on her, and and it's just like
yeah, and
it's also kind of funny because like Dana Carvey, he hasn't entirely found his George Bush yet. It's still kind of the embryonic George Bush.
Right.
He hasn't gotten the whole, like, that whole area down there, not gonna do it. He hasn't done it. It's not a fully refined impression yet.
Right. It's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but you can see it's getting there. You can see the seeds starting to grow there.
Yeah.
So it's Dana Carvey as George Bush as a combative host. We have Phil Hartman as Charles Shepard, who's a professor at Cornell. They're talking about China and trade policies.
Right.
And, of course, George Bush is like being combative of him saying like, "Oh, you think we should be, you think we should be friends with China after what they've done?" And then, of course, and then that leads to George Bush saying, "You know what I do, guys? You know what I'd do? I'd assign a committee and assess the situation.
Yeah.
And I'd have them writing and reading reports.
And I'd have that report read by both houses of Congress, and then they'd make recommendations based on what the report said, and then we see the audience start to turn on him.
Yeah.
It's
like yeah, I'm talking tough, guys.
Yeah. So it's not really coming off. So yeah, the sketch is basically saying, yeah, he is kind of a wimp, and he's like this policy wonk guy, which is it's sort of funny looking back at this because like with 2020 hindsight, knowing like, oh yeah, well we got into the first Gulf War under George H.W. Bush, so
yeah, how about that? But yeah, so George Bush sees that he's losing the audience, so he tries to pick a fight with the professor, tries to like shove him, and then the professor's like, "Are you trying to pick a fight with me?"
Yeah,
and like he immediately backs down, like, "Yeah, no, I'm not."
Yeah,
and then the professor gets all big and bold, like, "I think you are trying to pick a fight with me."
Right.
And the audience, of course, loves it, and then it basically ends up with the professor putting George Bush in a chokehold, making him say "Live from New York" on Saturday night.
Yeah, he's like, "Say it," and he goes, "Live from New York on Saturday night," and then he like releases him from the chokehold after. So that was a good touch. I liked how they worked that in.
Yeah, I really liked this cold open. I think it's pretty great.
It was good. I was kind of surprised that it was the cold open, because there's something that comes along later in the show that, like, if they did this show today, that would totally be the cold open. So, but it works well, and it's a pretty quick cold open as by today's standards. It's only like 4 minutes or so. So
yeah, no, absolutely, and it's a cold open that does what it seems like today's cold open kind of struggles to do, where it's like it's short, it has a point, it's trying to, it's political, but it's also saying something, and it's like
right,
and I don't know why it gets kind of difficult for them to do that nowadays, but yeah,
it's also nicely absurd. I mean, it has that sort of absurdity to its humor that I think is a real trademark of Odenkirk, Smigel, and Conan O'Brien in particular, where it's George Bush is hosting a talk show for some reason, and it's less literal than today's political sketches.
Very much so. Yeah. So far off to a great start. I dug this cold open.
Yeah. And by the way, can we take a few minutes to talk about the 1986 opening credits?
Woo-wee!
How amazing are those? These are still probably my favorite opening credits that SNL has ever done.
I think my favorite is there's that one. I forget if it's like later in the 80s or earlier, but it's like where it's all black and white. And it's the one where the logo is that circle of Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, that they did in the early 90s.
Yeah, I would say that's my favorite one. Like it's like all black and white, kind of gives New York like kind of a artsy, gritty vibe and look to it. Like I think that's my favorite, but this one is a close second for sure.
I think this one is still my favorite. And part of that is this was the opening when I first started watching the show on a regular basis. I'd seen episodes of SNL before, but it was always an isolated thing because like in the early 80s when it was like when like Eddie Murphy was on or Billy Crystal was on, I'd only see the show sporadically because it was like if my parents were out of town and the babysitter let me stay up to watch.
Right.
Because she didn't know what my bedtime was supposed to be.
Yeah.
That was my big youthful rebellion, was staying up late to watch SNL.
Rock and roll!
But this, I love. It's very cinematic. It's the cast like running around New York City. It's very exciting. It's almost like an action movie in places. We got Phil Hartman in a tuxedo. We got everybody's like kind of meeting up at a club, and it looks like they're all having a good time, and they're friends, and they're having fun hanging out together. I just like it, and it gave you a little impression of each cast member too.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was pretty. I when I saw that opening, I was like, oh, I remember this. Like, it took me back. I was like, I remember this.
And I remember, like, at the very end, like, they add in Kevin Nealon at the very end because he came last alphabetically. And it's just a quick shot of him, like, in a hat, and then he, like, enters into a club and gives, like, a little salute. And it doesn't quite fit with the rest of the opening because he wasn't a regular cast member when they shot it. So that shot's always seemed very incongruous to me because I remember the feeling when Kevin Nealon was added in as a regular instead of a featured player. And I was like, who is this guy? He doesn't really belong with these others. I looked at Kevin Nealon as this weird intruder. And I remember I felt that way about like Mike Myers too when he first came on the show. I was very attached to this cast as it was.
Yeah.
Just like those 7.
Yeah, no, I get it. Like whenever there's like a new cast member added, you're always like kind of hesitant to sort of welcome them with open arms.
Yeah. Who's this asshole?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're not my dad.
Yeah. Who's this Ben Stiller guy? I don't know if I like him.
Exactly. But like after a while you warm up to them and you're like, "Oh yeah, this guy's funny. All right."
Yeah, and then they ultimately, in some cases, they ultimately become your favorites. So, yeah, but I really love this opening. It's just so fun, and I love how it's shot.
It's a fantastic opening.
Yeah. All right, okay. So next we have Carl Weathers, his monologue. So
yeah, I didn't write too much about this one. I thought it was a little odd. This one.
Yeah, he has a lot of energy. He comes out, he's dancing to the theme. He came out and he talked about how he's achieved a lot of his childhood dreams. He's played in the NFL. He played for the Canadian Football League, he says, which wasn't really a childhood dream, but I guess it is if you come from Canada.
Yeah, it seemed like that joke kind of bombed a little bit.
It did. Yeah.
It kind of rattled him a bit. It's like, oh, shit, did I...
Yeah.
My Canadian dig isn't going well with the audience.
Yeah.
Probably some Canadians in the audience were like, hey, it's not funny, eh?
Yeah. Oh, and he had some line about Jerry Cooney. He was talking about how he played the heavyweight champion of the world in the Rocky movies, and then he was beaten by a white man who was like shorter, less built, and not as fast as him.
Yeah, because that can only happen in the movies. Which, by the way, Rocky, his very first movie he ever did.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. Like I did a little bit digging into Carl Weathers. So yeah, so he did play in the NFL for the Raiders, and
right.
I think he got in some injury where it kind of derailed his football career. So then he got into acting, and he did a lot of TV. Like I saw he was in an episode of Good Times, did an episode of Barnaby Jones, Starsky and Hutch, $6 Million Man, and then his very first movie was Rocky.
Wow.
So pretty cool.
That's really starting at the top of your profession, because that's because Rocky was Best Picture that year.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And then he'd gone on to do all the other kind of memorable roles. Like people remembered him from, of course, Predator, Happy Gilmore, which we've talked about on the podcast.
Right.
Younger people probably remember him in The Mandalorian as Grief Karga. Yeah, pretty esteemed career.
He was in. I mean, my favorite Carl Weathers is probably him in Arrested Development, because he was so funny. He was the acting teacher, David Cross's character. He was playing himself, and they chose to like portray Carl Weathers as this guy who was just like the most frugal man on earth.
Yeah, I remember hearing somewhere that was like his idea to put in that like he's super cheap and a bit of a spendthrift.
Yeah, I mean, because they had him saying like he was he would like save chicken bones. He was like, if you get this bone, you put in a little broth and a little potato, baby, you got a stew going. And he was so funny. Yeah,
I mean, he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
Yeah, but anyway, he makes this joke about Rocky, and at one point he says, Jerry Cooney, give it up. And Jerry Cooney was a boxer who was staging a comeback at this time, and apparently in April of '88, he went up against George Foreman as his comeback, and Foreman beat him in 2 rounds. So that's what he was referencing in the monologue. I just looked that up.
So it didn't go great for Jerry.
Yeah, no, and he of course was a white boxer, and Mr. Foreman was not.
He is not. I believe he is a black man.
I believe he is still a black man. Yes,
if memory serves.
Yes.
But then the monologue kind of took a weird turn where Carl Weathers wanted to sing a song, and he sang the song "What About a Rainbow" in this really weird falsetto.
Yeah.
Part of me was like, what's going on here?
I think the joke just was, he was like, my dream was, one of my unfulfilled dreams is to sing with the Saturday Night Live band. And then he gives it this build up, and then he sings this song, and it's sort of I wasn't really familiar with the song, but I think the joke was just that he was singing it in this falsetto.
Yeah, I tried to find this song. I couldn't find it anywhere online. I don't know if this is like a real song or if it's just like made up for this monologue, but
I don't know. Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't look into that.
yeah. Part of me was like, "Oh, is this like a reference to something?" But I guess it's just the silliness of Carl Weathers singing this song.
Yeah,
And like
I
at the
think
chorus.
I don't think the joke is any deeper than macho guy sings a song about rainbows in a falsetto.
All
That it was 1988. I think that was all you needed to.
right. Have this guy sing a little funny little Shirley Temple like song.
Because like when Carl Weathers steps out in this, God,
Mm.
the the man is so well built, and he's just this huge muscular. He's like a freaking Adonis, man.
Action Jackson.
He really, yeah. I was just like, damn, Carl Weathers should have been a bigger deal than he was.
I'd
You know,
agree. Yeah, I'd agree.
but I guess he just never found quite the right vehicle to be good to make that leap into leading man.
Yeah, but I mean, there was Action Jackson, but that didn't. That movie was kind of.
Yeah,
I think that was his big.
that was
Like
his shot, and I
that was
don't,
his shot.
and
Yeah.
I think because maybe that didn't become this huge thing like on a Schwarzenegger or a Die Hard level. He never really went up to the next level.
Yeah, fair enough.
So
Yeah. But yeah, monologue not too bad.
not too
Uh,
bad.
written by Terry Turner and A. Whitney Brown.
Yeah. Okay.
And so next up, we got a pre-tape. We got a commercial handy off.
Handy off. This is actually a rerun from a previous show with Danny DeVito. This is from so it originally aired December 5th, 1987.
Yeah, because I remember like SNL did used to do that. It used to like reuse
Mhm.
like pre-tape commercials in episodes like over and over again. They don't do that
Yeah,
anymore now.
and they really have gotten away from that because I guess usually they have the hosts in the pre-tapes now, so they can't really reuse them in later shows. But it
Mm.
used to be like when they did a fake episode, it would only be the cast in it. And yeah, it wasn't uncommon to see the more popular ones reused in later shows. So, I mean, but I recognized Handy Off from the first frame, and I was like, oh, this is great. This is one of my favorite commercial parodies that they've ever done. And they don't do as many commercial parodies as they used to, honestly.
Yeah, true. They don't do it that much. Yeah, and again, like when I saw this, it did trigger something in my mind. It's like, oh yeah, I remember this. It's
Yeah.
the one where Victoria Jackson has too many fingers on her
Hmm.
hands, and she
Yeah.
needs to get them off. Like you've tried sanding them off, you've tried
Yeah.
smashing them into car doors, but nothing
Yeah.
can get rid of those pesky extra fingers on your hand.
And the makeup department, yeah, they added like two extra fingers on her hands. So
Yeah,
so she has like a total of 14 fingers, and they look very realistic.
very much so. So the product is handy off. So
Hmm.
it's this thing that you put on your extra finger that has leprosy in it, and
Yeah.
it like over time it like bubbles and burns away the extra fingers.
Right, like you have leprosy, and we see very graphically. You see the fingers like they just kind of crumble and then they just gradually fall off, and it's just
Yeah,
such a wonderfully absurd thing.
yeah. Like you see her putting on the stuff and it starts to like bubble and fizz like Alka-Seltzer. It's just
Yeah,
like she's like, ooh, it tingles.
yeah,
And then the fingers just rot away and fall off the hand. Like,
yeah.
oh God.
It's something else, man.
It's pretty great. It's pretty great.
Yeah. Do we have writing credits for this one? I don't have it up since it was a rerun.
The handy off commercial was written by George Meyer.
I mean, I think this is one of their classic commercial parodies. This is one that you would always see in the best of shows, and it's
I
kind of
remember
dropped away and fallen down the memory hole a little bit.
yeah,
But
it's like this and like colon blow.
hmm
Oops, I crap my pants. It's like one of those
right,
commercials that I just
the bank that only makes change.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, this was a great era of commercial parodies for SNL. That was one of the show's real strengths, and that was a strength of the show in the original years too. So they were kind of continuing that on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Yeah, so next up, the NFL Today.
okay, guess we're giving up on the writing credits. All right.
Oh, okay. No, I thought we were gonna okay, hold on. I'll see if I can find it.
No, well, I was vamping, so you had time to look it up.
Oh, is that what we're doing? Okay.
That's what we were doing.
Okay, got it. Got it, boss.
That's what we were doing. I thought that was kind of clear from the context. You were like, "Oh, let me look it up," and then I talked for a few minutes, and then I thought
Oh,
you would get that in. But
nope.
okay,
All right, I'll see if I can find it. Hold on.
yeah,
Oh wait, no, that's not it. All right, I'll find it. I'll find it.
okay, all right.
Well, yeah,
So,
but we can like keep on moving, and then I'll just get back to it.
okay, all right, okay. So next up, we have a sketch called NFL Today. This is another one where we're going to have to give a little historical context for
Oh
this.
yes.
I had to do a research deep dive on this. This was I don't even know if the NFL Today is still on. I don't know if it was a show that was on CBS before Sunday Football, and they had a commentator on there called Jimmy the Greek.
Yes, Jimmy Schneider.
Yeah, Jimmy Snyder, who was a sports commentator and he was like an odds maker, but apparently because of like broadcast rules or something, he couldn't mention betting or gambling in his segment. He could only like predict the score of each game and like give the spread.
Right.
But like so, bookies and stuff they could still make bets and things based on what Jimmy the Greek said. But he was, but I didn't know that there were rules that you couldn't mention betting or gambling on that. And Jimmy in early 1988, he got into a little trouble.
Little bit.
He was being interviewed for Martin Luther King's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Did you look up what he said?
I did. I have it right here. It's on Wikipedia.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the same thing. Do you want me to read it, or would you rather read it? I'll read it if you want. I'll take the bullet.
If you're comfortable with it, go for it.
Yeah, why not? So,
are you not comfortable? I'll do it.
well, no, I'm just wondering how I should introduce this because I'm not quite sure what the exact question was he was responding to.
Well,
but apparently it was a question about African Americans being naturally superior athletes.
Well, it's.
I think.
Well, no, all right. So it says that the person interviewing him,
Yeah.
Huddling, said he'd been doing interviews with various people in the restaurant for a program celebrating MLK's birthday and what they thought the next step in civil rights progress for African Americans should be. He put the question to Jimmy the Greek Snyder. It was all on the occasion of MLK's birthday, said Huddling. So I thought it was an appropriate forward-looking question and got a backward-looking answer.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the quote that's on Wikipedia that Jimmy the Greek said. This is an exact quote. Oh boy. Let me just say before I quote this, we here at the SNL Nerds do not agree with nor approve of these comments.
Nope.
The black is a better athlete to begin with because he's been bred to be that way. Because of his high thighs and big thighs that goes up into his back. And they can jump higher and run faster because of their bigger thighs. And he's been bred to be the better athlete because this goes all the way back to the Civil War when, during the slave trading, the slave owner would breed his big black to his big woman so that he could have a big black kid see. That's where it all started. Oh my fucking God.
The only reason I knew about this was because I'd listened to Howard Stern back in the day, and Howard Stern would play this from time to time on his show. And
wow,
yeah,
I remembered. Jimmy the Greek. I remembered that he was a sports commentator, and I remembered that he had been fired for racist comments. I did not remember really what the racist comments were. I was like kind of racking my brain before this, and I was like, wait, he wasn't the guy who said look at that little
no, I don't think so.
Person run, and then I was like, oh no, wait, that was Howard Cosell, and so I had to look up what Jimmy the Greek said, and it was so much worse than I thought it was going to be.
It ain't great, and he also
God, man.
Yeah, he also said in another interview about the only sports realm in which white people then dominated was coaching.
Yeah.
And if black people were to take coaching, as I quote, if black people were to quote take coaching as I think everyone wants them to, there is not going to be anything left for white people. Wow, holy,
These
holy.
comments were broadcast on national television in 1988, and oh my God,
Happy
thank
Black
God
History
he
Month,
was fired.
everybody.
Yeah.
So based on what he said, based on those things, that's where we're starting off with this sketch with NFL
Yeah.
Today. In this one, we have Phil Hartman as Jimmy the Greek, and we have Kevin Nealon as Brett Musburger.
Brett Musburger, who is the commentator on NFL Today, and Kevin Nealon would imitate him just by pulling the corners of his eyelids down.
Yeah,
because like Brett Musburger had kind of like a droopy eye thing going on, and Kevin Nealon kind of looked like him, so he would start out by just pulling his eyelids down with his fingers.
yes, and of course he would finish every sentence by saying, "Here on CBS."
Yeah, because apparently Brett Musburger said that a lot. So,
right. So, basically, the premise of this sketch is the NFL Today. CBS Sports have brought back Jimmy the Greek, just to give him like a 2-week probation to see, sort of apologize and see how he'll do after the whole backlash he had after the incendiary comments he made. And so,
which is completely fictional because in real life he was just fired outright and he never came back.
Right, exactly. So in this one, we see Phil Hartman as Jimmy the Greek, wearing a Jesse Jackson '88 button, which I appreciated.
Yeah,
and just being like very pro-black and saying things like how much, like how just being more, I guess, woke to all the amazing things
like
black people have done.
He's starting. He's like bending over backwards to he's like. I don't want to say overcorrecting, but I guess the joke is he's kind of overcorrecting.
Yeah, like him saying, like giving props to Crispus Attucks and George Washington Carver. It's like, hey, if you've ever eaten a peanut butter sandwich, you have him to thank for that.
Yeah, and he's like, we've got the 2 coaches this week that are lily white, and that makes me sick. And at one point he's comparing 2 players, and he says, "As a white man, John Elway's been given a free ride all his life." And we have Carl Weathers showing up as Doug Williams from the Washington Redskins. And then Jimmy the Greek starts in where he's talking about fixing up Bo Jackson with Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah, then it kind of reverts to his old self. Like when because at one point he asked, I think Brett Musburger asked Jimmy the Greek, like, "Do you have any questions for what is it? Do you have any questions for Carl Weathers?"
Doug Williams was who
Doug Williams here on CBS. And then Jimmy the Greek asked him, "Hey, have you ever read Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin?"
Yeah.
He says, like, "No, I haven't." It's like, all right,
my question wouldn't make much sense without that, but but it's a great book. You should read it.
You should really read it, yeah. And then the sketch does something interesting where it kind of breaks with a commercial in between it for like King Cobra malt liquor.
Yeah, I think that was like a real commercial.
No, I think it was fake.
Was it fake? Okay, I don't know. So. I didn't recognize any cast members in it, so I was assuming it was just a real commercial from the era, but no, I don't know.
I don't think so. Wow.
I mean, and they also had an interesting break where it was like, you make the call, and it was like, this player didn't pass to his black teammate. Now, was this because he didn't see him, or was it because he was racist?
Yeah.
And it's like, if you said he was racist, you made the right call.
Right. But then, like you said, it ends with Jimmy the Greek, trying to make some future predictions for who would be great in the future. And then Jimmy the Greek saying, "Look, I've heard through rumors that Bo Jackson is dating Oprah Winfrey, and if they were to meet and have a child, look out.
In 20 years, the NFL would have one hell of a player."
Yeah. And then I heard that Mike Quick from the Eagles is dating the girl from Tootie from the Facts of Life. And brother, can she jump?
Yeah, which Whew, even as a parody, this is kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is. You think.
Yeah.
But then, of course, it cuts to "Please stand by," and they immediately take Jimmy the Greek away.
Right. Yes. Yes. So a good parody of a then current news story. I mean, it was still like pretty fresh in the news. This happened. The whole Jimmy the Greek thing happened in mid-January, and this is an episode from January 30th, so it was within the last 2 weeks. Uh,
Yeah,
this was written by Robert Smigel and Jim Downey, by the way.
the two of the greats.
Yeah, Jimmy the Greek. He did wear that gold chain for real, didn't he? I seem to remember him doing that.
I think so. Yeah, I remember him being kind of like a flashy kind of dresser.
Right.
So the gold chain I think was his, but yeah, the Jesse Jackson '88 button. That's not.
No, yeah, that's
That was for the sketch.
That's comedic license there. And I don't. Yeah, Jimmy the Greek. He didn't really do much of anything after his firing, as I recall. He might have popped up here and there, but that was pretty much the end of his career, as I recall.
Pretty much, yeah. And then he unfortunately passed away in '96. But yeah, that
Right.
was pretty much it.
Wow.
Woo!
How do you say that when you know you are when there is a camera pointed at you, you go into they're better athletes because they're bred that way? My fucking God, man.
I think in his mind that was like, no, that's like logically sound. That's not racist. That's like that's
Yeah.
science. That's
Yeah.
history. And I was like, my guy. My
Yeah,
guy.
there was a documentary where Frank Deford he sympathetically noted that Jimmy often tried to sound more educated than he actually was, and that his comments were basically him trying to make a point on a subject on which he knew nothing. That's probably about the most charitable interpretation you could have of that, but
Yeah, sometimes when you don't know anything about a subject, you can just shut the fuck up
yeah,
and not say
yeah,
anything.
um,
Silence is free, people.
yeah, but wow, man,
Woo!
that is wow.
Yeah, that is fuego.
I mean, this is something I was like, this was 1988.
Not that long ago.
It feels like a million years ago when you look at this. Though.
Yeah, I was around. I was like 10 or something, but I was around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in my teens, and
Yeah.
wow.
Wow. Wowie wow wow.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so next we have Democratic Debate '88, which wow, this was a blast from the past. Oh, by the way, yeah, at this point in the show, there was also a shot with Robbie Robertson playing with the band. We didn't on the version of this episode that we watched. We didn't get to see any of the Robbie Robertson musical segments because they're not on Peacock.
Yeah.
So I assume because of music rights issues.
Yeah,
so
sorry about that. But we imagine they were great. They look pretty cool. We see G.E. Smith jamming along next to him. So
yeah, and it's Robbie Robertson. I'm sure it was great.
Yeah,
so.
Sure, it kicked ass.
Mm-hmm. But next we have Democratic Debate '88.
Damn, yeah.
This is written by Al Franken and Tom Davis. Man, this was a blast from the past because this made me remember all these Democratic candidates from '88 that I'd forgotten about. We have Nora Dunn as Pat Schroeder, who, when she withdrew from the race, she cried, and I guess she got a lot of blowback from that.
Yeah, because there's no crying in politics.
Yeah, because it's 1988, and God forbid if a woman expresses human emotions.
Unfit for office.
We have John Lovitz as Michael Dukakis. Apparently, this was the first time he played Michael Dukakis on the show, and of course, he'd play him a lot more because Dukakis ended up being the Democratic Party candidate.
I remember Dukakis.
We had Al Franken as Paul Simon, and Franken wasn't really popping up on the show much as an actor at this point, but he was a writer on the show, and he looked quite a bit like Paul Simon.
The senator,
I should clarify. Yeah, the Senator Paul Simon,
not Lawrence Buddy.
Yeah, and Paul Simon, if I remember correctly, he did host the show at some point, right? Or at least cameoed on the show.
The senator, or
the senator.
I don't remember that
because I think it was when they had Paul Simon on as a musical guest, and they had both of the Paul Simons come out at the same time. And I think the joke was, like, oh, they were asking me to, I thought I was going to be on the show and I brought my guitar. And yeah, but Paul Simon, he's pretty forgotten today, but he looked a lot like Al Franken and he wore a bow tie. That was kind of his trademark.
Yeah, the bow tie. I mean, they make a meal of it in the sketch, but yeah, the bow tie, I remember, was a pretty big deal.
And then let's see, we have Phil Hartman as Bruce Babbitt, who, God, I haven't thought about that name in ages. I'd forgotten Bruce Babbitt was a thing.
Hey, Babbitt.
We have Dana Carvey as Dick Gephardt. Again, a politician I'd totally forgotten about. And I was like, 15, 16 around this time. So I was like starting to pay attention to politics. I couldn't vote yet, but
right.
I was paying attention.
Yeah. You were around.
Yeah, we have Kevin Nealon as Al Gore,
okay.
Who, of course, became quite prominent in later years because he became VP in the Clinton administration, ran for president himself.
Yeah,
and that worked out beautifully for him.
Worked out great. Fantastic.
Wonderful. No notes.
That's right. Minor inconvenience.
We have our host, Carl Weathers, as Jesse Jackson. Because, it's 1988. SNL doesn't have any black cast members. What are you, crazy?
Happy Black History Month.
There's another thing that just makes it seem like a million years ago is how lily the white the cast is.
It is. It's as white as a driven snow.
And it's, and that was just the norm. Nobody thought anything of it.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this is cool. Oh, we need a person of color to play Diana Ross. We'll just put Jen Hooks in brownface and get her out there.
I don't think they ever actually did that, did they? I don't remember Jen Hooks ever doing blackface. Did she?
Oprah. She did. She definitely did it for like Oprah Winfrey, and I'm pretty sure.
Did?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
It might be kind of hard to find, but like I remember it, and I'm pretty sure she did it for Diana Ross, but she definitely did it for like Oprah.
I mean, I don't question that the show was doing blackface. I just didn't know that Jan Hooks was ever one of the people who did it. I mean, I know Jimmy Fallon played Chris Rock on the show once.
Yeah,
he was made up in blackface, and Billy Crystal played Sammy Davis Jr. and
yeah, it's you like guys, we could just hire black people to do this, and it's like no, we brown makeup isn't that expensive, so let's just go this right. Let's just do this.
So okay, we're going on a bit of a tangent, but I don't mean to put you on the spot, but let me ask you: when you see something like that, what goes through your head? What does it feel like when you see that?
I mean, when I was younger, I didn't think much of it, but as I get older and like kind of understand more of the dynamics behind it, I'm like, it does feel a little uncomfortable. I was like, yeah, we could have just gotten like I don't know. It just seems like something of a kind of a bygone era where I remember of course they did that blackface like back in the day, Al Jolson and stuff, but that's because they wouldn't let black people perform like that. So
right.
Now we can, so let's just let them do that. Why do we need to make them up and whatnot for? It just feels weird and old fashioned, I guess. And I mean that actually kind of comes into play later on in another sketch in this episode with Asian American, and we'll get there though. We'll get to that.
So okay, and then all right. Thank you for that. And then lastly, we have Dennis Miller as Gary Hart, who I think Gary Hart he's mainly remembered today because of the sex scandal that basically derailed his campaign.
Yeah, because I mean I know that like I think Hugh Jackman played him in like a biopic.
Yeah, he did. Like Gary Hart, he was like this young, charismatic politician, and like for a while in the 80s, he was thought of as like the second coming of John Kennedy.
Yeah, like he really had a good shot at being the guy.
Right, and he seemed like he had a lot on the ball and all that, and then it turned out that he was having a sexual affair with, I can't remember if she was a staffer or not, or if it was just an extramarital affair. He was having an affair with a woman named Donna Rice.
Right, yeah.
And there was a picture of her sitting on his lap, and it was outside his boat or his yacht, the monkey business.
Yes, I remember that.
Which, I mean, is there a more on the nose name for for the boat owned by a senator who's having an extramarital affair?
Oh yeah, you just
And again, this was, back in the day when the discovery of an extramarital affair could derail a presidential campaign. I know.
remember
I
the
know. It seems weird to me too, people.
remember those days.
It was a pre-Clinton time.
Uh,
And I'd forgotten how kind of messy the end of his campaign was, because I looked this up. He dropped out of the race in September, and then he re-entered the race in December of '87.
really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then of course, when his numbers weren't where they needed to be, he dropped out of the race again. I'd forgotten all that. I thought it was just he dropped out once and he was done, but no.
Damn.
So, wow.
Oh boy. All right.
So this was the field. I mean, this was, yeah, the Democrats didn't have a real deep bench of talent at this time, I think.
Yeah. Not
I
like
mean,
today.
we had some promising people, but we also had some people who are not overly burdened with charisma, like like Al Gore or Bruce Babbitt or Dick Gephardt. And
Yeah. I mean, we saw as such in the sketch where, they
yeah,
talked about Paul Simon. Like basically the
hmm
one thing they know about him is his bow tie, and he went on
right,
about how people are trying to stop him from wearing the bow tie.
the wearing the bow tie, and yeah, and Franken's like duplicating the cadence of Paul Simon's voice pretty well. Yeah, and he was just he came off very wonky.
Yeah, I mean, Dukakis really wasn't much any better too. We see John
Yeah,
Lovitz kind of play. I mean, he always did a good Dukakis, I thought.
yeah. Dukakis was very dry. I just remembered another thing that sank Dukakis's campaign. I remember during one of the debates, I think he was asked like how he would react if his wife had been raped and killed. Like, would he be in favor of the death penalty then?
Oh,
And he
geez.
gave this very dispassionate answer,
Yeah,
which that hurt him because people were like, "Oh, dude, you're talking about your wife being raped and killed," and I guess it was a principled answer, but people wanted a little more passion or something. I mean, what a loaded question to ask somebody.
yeah. I mean, that question's that's kind of an unfair question. I don't know if I'd like.
Yeah, no, that's a real unfair question because
Yeah,
I mean, there's no good answer to it. Because if you say yes, I would be in favor of the death penalty, you look like a hypocrite. But if
yeah,
you say like, oh, no, I'm not, then you look like, oh, asshole, you're not doing right by your wife. So I
yeah,
mean, there's no good answer to that.
yeah. And he just never had the charisma needed to that people like
Yeah,
really look forward to.
right.
Yeah, and I guess so much could be also be said for Gephardt because, like, I did notice, like, when Dana Carvey as Gephardt was giving his answer to a question that Pat Schroeder asked him, they kind of switched it up a little bit and they went to
Mhm.
what all the other candidates like inner monologue, and like part of me
Yeah,
was thinking
yeah, we're
was,
hearing their thoughts while Dick Gephardt's giving this long, boring answer, and
yeah,
and that was funny.
like part of me was thinking, oh, was there not too much to write about Gephardt or enough to make fun of, so they went to this whole thing about people's monologue, like they went to inner monologue of Jesse Jackson, played by Carl Weathers, and
Right.
he was thinking, man, this guy ain't funky at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
And of course, Gary Hart checking out a girl in the third row.
yeah. Yeah. And it's more or less Dennis Miller just almost playing Gary Hart as himself because Dennis Miller wasn't really. He was just the Weekend Update guy. He didn't really mix in the sketches that much.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, and he's just playing him as like just kind of this, like an ultra pervy Dennis Miller, basically.
that's our Dennis Miller.
But it was really funny.
Yeah, yeah. And then I actually kind of skipped ahead to the next episode after this, and they kind of did the same sketch, but with the Republican
Right.
debate. And then we see, like, we also see Pat Schroeder and the other Republican nominees. And in that episode, we see Dan Aykroyd making an appearance as Bob Dole.
I remember that. Yeah, he did a very good Bob Dole. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You know it. I know it.
Um,
People know it.
yeah, yeah. And they were asking Al Gore about like, oh, you admitted that you smoked pot in college, and and she asked him like, "Oh, what were you listening to when you and your wife Tipper smoked pot in college?" And he says, "Pink Floyd."
Of course.
Which, like, again, at the time, that was an unusual thing for a politician, because you didn't really see many politicians of Al Gore's generation of, like, that were baby boomers.
Yeah, yeah. And like, I think, and that's also the time Tipper Gore was trying to get a lot of songs banned off the radio for like
Right, which
suggesting
ultimately led to the labels on record albums, the parental advisory, explicit lyrics.
Okay, now listeners, a record is something that has music.
Vinyl's back. They know what a record is.
I don't know, man. But yeah, this
records were like the MP3s of their time. Okay,
that you could hold in your hands. Boom, perfect.
Yes.
But yeah, I dug this sketch. I thought it was pretty great.
Yeah, apparently this was their first political debate sketch since the original cast, which,
wow,
that kind of blows my mind. That, because now, like, political sketches like this, that they're SNL's bread and butter. Like, if they did this today, this would totally be the cold open.
Yes, this totally would be a cold open for sure.
Yeah, even though that was like 7 or 8 minutes, and you didn't really have cold opens of that length at this era, but
not yet.
Yeah, but this would totally be it. Except now it would be like 12 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. The long cold open. Your kids aren't ready for that yet, but your kids will love it.
But I thought Carl Weathers really kicked ass as Jesse Jackson, and I like this. I like the scripting of it. He was given the sort of rhyming sort of thing that Jesse Jackson, I think, did in a lot of his speeches. I think he was the basic take on Jesse Jackson was he was a very skilled orator.
Yeah, so he kind of did. Yeah. Yes, because he's a reverend, so he has that kind of big, bombastic kind of way of speaking and rhyming everything and rhyming all the time.
Like, remember when they had Jesse Jackson on Weekend Update and he read Green Eggs and Ham?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
In his Jesse Jackson style. I just remembered that.
Wow. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, and he delivered it like a I do not like them, Sam. I am. Hilarious. Yeah. Hilarious.
I mean, kind of like Daryl Hammond kind of took that cadence when he did his Jesse Jackson impression later on. But yeah, it was like,
and probably also wore blackface.
I'm sure there's another one.
Pretty sure he did. God damn it. Holy crap. Like, until we started cataloging this, I'd kind of forgotten how many white cast members put on blackface or brownface to play black people. Just cast some black people, SNL, for God's sakes.
Why do that? Come on, brown makeup isn't that expensive. Afro wigs are cheap. Come on.
Oh boy.
Next sketch.
Next sketch. Oh boy, mother-in-law.
Yeah. Happy Black History Month, everybody.
Wow. This was apparently a recurring character of Phil Hartman, which I'd totally forgotten about. I think they just did it twice, but apparently he did this character before when John Larroquette hosted in the previous season.
Yeah, I don't remember this character at all.
And Phil Hartman is in drag as a mother-in-law. He basically looks like the old lady in a Far Side cartoon. He's got the cat's eye glasses, and he's got one of those wigs that's almost a beehive, but not quite.
Yeah. So, so hot.
Yeah. He's playing a very matronly older woman. And we have John Lovitz in there as her gay hairdresser, Damien.
Right. And so the hairdresser is making a visit. They're spending time enjoying each other's company, and then the hairdresser points out the two guns that Helen, Phil Hartman's character, has, and like how he's freaked out by these two guns and why have them.
Yeah, and Hartman's like polishing them, and she's like, "Oh well, I'm an old lady. I need them for protection." And then she finds out that her daughter is coming by with her new boyfriend, and Damien's like, "Oh no, how is he going to react? Will he be accepting that I'm gay?" And Phil Hartman's mother-in-law character says, "Well, just butch it up a little bit until we know for sure."
1988.
Wow. I was watching this sketch and I was like, this feels like the 1980s were 200 years ago. Because I was like, my God, man.
It was a different time, baby.
Yeah.
And Yeah.
Yeah, and Jan Hooks comes by. She brings her new boyfriend Jim home, and he's played by Carl Weathers, and it's it's shocking because he is a black man.
Yes. You can see Helen immediately has a problem with that. Yeah,
Right.
and but like, yes, Helen is trying to hide it.
Yeah.
The hairdresser Damien is still trying to act kind of macho, bro,
Right.
asking him, "How about that Super Bowl?" You
Right.
know,
Because
just
in real life, the Super Bowl was coming up, and just the next day was Super Bowl 22. They talk about that on Update in a little bit.
right,
So,
right.
so I'm sure that was part of the thinking of having Carl Weathers as a host because he was an ex football player and
Yes,
also had a movie coming out.
absolutely. So then there's like a lot of tension in between all of them. You know,
Yeah.
like Helen is uncomfortable with Jim, and you can see the hairdresser is uncomfortable because he doesn't want to make Jim uncomfortable. So Jim kind of tries to ease the tension by saying, "Hey, why don't you just you know come out and then because I know you seem gay, so just come out and say
Hmm.
you're gay." And then of course Helen takes offense to that, like, "How dare you say that? Get out of my house!" And then she like grabs one of the guns, and then Jim
Yeah.
grabs the gun away from her, and the gun
Well,
goes.
before that, when Carl Weathers is admiring her guns, he like picks up one of the guns, and we see Phil Hartman's character immediately panic, and she's like, "Ah!" Because black man with a gun.
Of course.
Which, wow. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, and so yeah, they pick up a gun, and we have a honest to god shootout between the two of them.
Yeah, because like I think as they struggle for the gun, it goes off. Then Phil Hartman grabs the gun. Carl Weathers grabs the other gun. All the other two people just hit the deck, and then it's just Helen and Jim just shooting at each other in the
Right.
living room.
And like on one hand, I kind of like that it escalates that absurdly, but on the other hand, oh my god.
Yeah,
And they make a joke about, like uh, John Lovitz, his Damien character, he immediately devolves into this, screaming mess because, gay man, how else is he going to react?
of course.
And they have a little sight gag where he's like cowering in the corner and he's like covering up his chest and covering up his genitals, and he's exactly paralleling a statue that's like by the front door, and that's a little sight gag.
Yeah, yeah, and but then after the shootout ends, um, the mom, Helen says, I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. I shouldn't have jumped to the conclusions." And then
Yeah,
Carl,
I guess I overreacted.
I guess I overreacted just a little bit. And but then Jim forgives her and he says he can't let a few, you know,
A
million.
few million crazy white people spoil it for the rest of the planet.
Wow, I written
Yeah.
by Phil Hartman.
Written by Phil Hartman, ladies and gentlemen.
This one came in hot.
I had no memory of this sketch.
None at all.
I was, my jaw was kind of on the floor when this sketch was
I mean,
playing.
I guess I kind of see what Phil Hartman was going for about like people's like opinions about other people, like or uninformed opinions
Right.
about others.
I mean, on one hand, it's like about white panic, but on the other hand, we've kind of evolved as a society since this sketch. So even if well intentioned, this sketch looks pretty
Yeah,
bad in today's light.
no, for sure. But yeah, it is but that's basically what this sketch is supposed to be about, like white panic and people's
Yeah.
preconceived notions about
Yeah.
gay people and black people. Like I
Yeah.
see what he was trying to say. Like he
Yeah. But
like
it just, because like today in SNL, and I'll commend SNL for this, like we will have, like Bowen Yang in a sketch. Sometimes he plays gay people, sometimes he plays straight people, and it's rarely, if ever, commented on in an unusual way.
right.
And interracial relationships are just portrayed without any comment in sketches commonly now. I
Yeah,
mean, they will pair up a white cast member with a black cast member, and it is not the subject of the sketch
not at all.
at all. I mean, more often than not, it is not, because that's not an unusual thing or an exceptional thing anymore, or it's not considered to be.
Nope. But yeah,
But
this. like I appreciate what Phil was trying to get at, but I don't quite know if he got there. But I appreciate the attempt.
Yeah.
I appreciate the attempt.
I mean, I guess it speaks well of our society that this sketch has aged so badly.
Yeah, it's
because it shows that we are, I think, in a better place now. But
I,
wow, man.
this one was wild.
Yeah.
You crazy for this one, SNL?
This was wow.
Uh,
I was like, and you haven't pulled this sketch from Peacock? Really? Okay. All right.
yeah.
That's a choice. But I mean, I was like, let me Google this. Let's see. Was 1988 still during the Civil War? No, it wasn't. Oh, okay. So
that's good to know.
Because I wouldn't necessarily know it from this sketch.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what, the Civil War and you know, Run DMC didn't coincide? Is that what you're trying to say?
Huh. Apparently not.
Huh.
Apparently not. I was just making sure my memory wasn't playing tricks on me. But
okay, I'll take your word for it, man.
Yeah.
Weekend update.
Weekend update with Dennis Miller. Starts out with a joke about Phantom of the Opera, and Dennis Miller in the Phantom of the Opera mask, the half mask from the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, because apparently the Phantom of the Opera musical had just opened at this point.
Oh, that's why. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I didn't think it had opened this late. I thought it opened earlier in the 80s, but I thought it opened like 85 or 86. I didn't look it up to double check that. Maybe I should look that up real fast. Give me a second.
Okay. Yeah, because like when they opened with Dennis with the Phantom of the Opera mask, I was like, what is this? I didn't get it. And then he just took off the mask, and then he went into his first joke. But then he clearly had like a scar on his face. And then after he told his first joke, he's like, oh yeah, no, this scar is just the fake from the makeup department. I could just rip it off. And then he rips it off, and it seems like it actually hurts. It's like, ow, that hurt. Whoa. Right. And then he like takes a beat, and the audience is like, is this a bit, or is he really hurt himself? And then it's like you see like a genuine reaction, like of him, like, ow, that hurt. And then it's kind of awkward and quiet for like a minute. And
and then he goes acting like the master thespian character of John Lovitz.
Yeah.
It's this weird sort of sloppy gag because it takes him so long to pull the scar off. I think he genuinely was having trouble with it, and then it hurt more than he was expecting. And it's a weird, awkward thing.
Yeah, like part of me was like, well, why? I mean, if it's going to be that much trouble, why put the scar on your face in the first place? Like, is the scar gag really that necessary? Like, there was.
I mean, it didn't really get much of any response. So
it didn't add anything to anything.
I just looked it up. The Phantom of the Opera musical, it opened in October of 1986 in London, and then it came to Broadway in 1988. So it had just come to Broadway at this point. And
wow.
It was like a big hit right out of the gate and ran for years and years and years.
The lullaby of Broadway.
Yeah. Okay. So,
but yeah, and so with the weekend update, one thing I kind of forgot was how many. I didn't realize there were so many puns involved in these jokes. Like like you said at the first was the Phantom of the Opera.
Right,
pun,
and then we have a shot of Oprah wearing the Phantom of the Opera mask.
Right, and then there was like the breakfast cereals by foreign leaders like Raisa Bran, and Gorbachev's.
Yeah, because Mikhail Gorbachev's wife was Raisa.
Yes.
Which sounds kind of like raisin.
So
or spelled similar to raisin. I don't know. It was this really reminded me of two things. One, like how low budget a show SNL still was at this point.
It was so it was almost no budget.
I know, because this like looking back on a 1988 show from a 2024 vantage point, this show looks so chintzy now.
It really it looks so ramshackle. I mean, if you look back at the SNL episodes from the 70s, it looks really like black box theater.
Because they didn't have the it was a pre-desktop publishing era. We couldn't do the computer graphics that we can do today. And, even things like, putting logos on the screen, it looks so much cheesier.
Yeah, for sure.
And we just have like a few green screen or blue screen things and chroma keyed behind Dennis Miller, and that's it.
Yeah, very, very much so. He did have that one joke I liked too about the Amtrak derailment.
Yeah, he has a Amtrak derailment, and he says it was done by a disgruntled Amtrak employee who painted a tunnel on a brick wall, and his name was Wile E. Coyote. But then they don't even put a shot of Wile E. Coyote behind him, which really would have put the gag over the top, I think.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah, that would have sold a little bit more. But I mean, those that got it, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. I just felt like they could have done a little more. We had Victoria Jackson, who did a desk segment where she recited a poem that she'd written called "The Life of a Table," and it's basically just her doing a backwards handstand on the desk.
Yeah,
because like Victoria Jackson was a gymnast, and she would occasionally do like these gymnastic things.
Yeah, and so it's just basically Victoria Jackson. Yeah, like you said, like kind of positioning herself to look like a table where she's like
right. So she's bending over backwards. I don't.
Heyo.
There has to be a name for this position in acrobatics, but I don't know what it is. But yeah, a backward handstand is the closest I can say.
Right, and then she just recites this poem about the life of a table. It's
right.
Very odd.
It is.
Like, I mean, odd but slightly charming, I guess.
It is because I mean her persona on the show, she played a lot of bimbo type characters. I think partly because she was like the bubbly blonde type, and she had like this high pitched, slightly nasal voice, so she sounded kind of bimbo-ish. Yeah. So that was the character that SNL had her play a lot.
Yeah, that's the thing with Victoria Jackson. Like she always kind of, I don't want to say pigeonhole, but she kind of was. Like she was always just play like kind of the ditzy blonde, the airhead.
She was very typed on the show. She was very, very typed.
Yeah, she got to break out a little bit whenever she played like Roseanne or something.
But... Yeah, and I think one of the writers went to her and they were like, "You could play Roseanne because she's nasal and you're nasal." So, because Victoria Jackson wasn't really much of an impressionist.
No, not really.
Certainly not on the order of like a Jan Hooks or even a Nora Dunn.
No, not at all. Like,
so she was sort of the also ran among the female castmates.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh yeah, Victoria, she's there.
Yeah, and so she did a fair amount of desk segments, and Dennis Miller had a good line after she finished where he just says, if we were married, I'd never leave the apartment.
Dennis.
Which on one hand is funny, and on the other hand is a little like, okay, that's kind of frat boyish, but okay.
It's a little sleazy, little bit.
Yeah.
Then we got I remember these from back in the day. My man, Mr. A. Whitney Brown, coming through.
A. Whitney Brown, he with the big picture. A. Whitney Brown, he was like, I don't think he ever became a full cast member. He was like a featured player on SNL, and he would just come on Weekend Update every few weeks and do a commentary called The Big Picture.
Yeah, and this one he's talking about the something that's not timely at all. He's talking about the Jews and Arabs in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, it's all about the Israelis and the Palestinians, and it's depressing how timely this still was.
It could have been done yesterday.
It really, yeah. He had a line I really liked. He said, "It's a country that's smaller than Long Island and has a smaller percentage of Jews as well." Which, solid line. That's a great line. Honestly, I don't know. I was never too fond of A. Whitney Brown's The Big Picture.
Part of me kind of liked these when I was younger, but I think only because they were so, like, I guess, cerebral in a way. Like, in a way, like, I'd watch these and I'd be like, oh, this is what, like, highbrow grown-up humor is like. This is what the adults like.
It's much drier than a typical SNL thing. I mean, it really was more like just a commentary with jokes.
Right, like him saying things like, "Oh, in America, we're on the side of the Israelis because, well, they owe us money."
Yeah,
and if they claim to be a free country, they should act like it and use fire hoses and dogs like we did in Alabama.
Yeah. And then I remember, like, A. Whitney Brown, he left SNL. I think he was gone by like 1990 or so,
something like that. Yeah.
And then I didn't see him at all anywhere for a few years. And then when the Daily Show first started up, he was a recurring guy on the Daily Show. Like during the Craig Kilborn years, I believe.
Yeah, wow, that's
a throwback. I don't think I've heard of him since, really. I don't know.
Yeah, he's kind of one of those mysterious figures who kind of just pops up here and there, and
Yeah,
I think he's on. I think he's still on Twitter. I think you can reach out to him on Twitter. But yeah,
yeah,
he's a bit of a recluse. He's kind of hard to find.
yeah. And I don't know if he's just not heard much from by choice or what. It's just yeah, he's kind of fallen down the memory hole a little bit.
Yeah, but yeah, Weekend Update. I enjoyed it for the most part. Like, there's still, it's like it's definitely had a different vibe than the Weekend Updates
Hmm.
of today, but there's still a lot of good stuff in there, I thought.
I was pretty surprised rewatching this because like this was my era of SNL, and then looking back at this, maybe it was an off week, but I was kind of surprised by how I didn't really find much of it very funny.
Yeah, a lot of the humor is still, at least said, like, it's very dry. There were a bunch of
Yeah,
jokes that Dennis Miller had in this that I thought didn't quite hit.
yeah, a lot
Um,
of his jokes didn't land, and I was like, is this because my sense of humor has evolved since then? Was he just having an off week, or is my perception being colored because I know what happened to Dennis Miller over the decades? I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe some combination of all three.
yeah, it's a bummer, but
I don't know, but I remember like, oh, Dennis Miller. This was like my golden age of Weekend Update, and I'm looking back at this, and I'm like, this isn't very good.
I mean, it's what we say on the podcast all the time. Like, sometimes, like, we remember the past differently. Like you
Yeah.
said, this era was our era. So
Hmm.
back in our minds, like, every episode was a banger. And so when you go back and look at it, it's like, no, not every episode was great. They had some
No, look,
duds.
the show, like almost by definition, has always been hit and miss.
Right.
Like you watch any of the classic episodes, and especially if you're watching them uncut, you're going to see some bad sketches,
Oof.
and they're like, but generally you forget the bad sketches and you just remember the good ones. So that's why it always seems like it was better X number of years ago.
Right.
And it's whenever you first started watching the show, most likely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
But yeah, I mean, the Weekend Update, I thought it had some good moments, some interesting moments, but yeah, not
yeah,
overall, not laugh out loud funny moments.
yeah, yeah. Um,
So yeah,
so
so that's
that really surprised me because I was expecting, because I remember Weekend Update usually being a highlight of the show, and
no.
this was not to me. I
Mm,
mean,
yeah, it happens. It happens.
yeah, yeah.
What can you
Uh,
do?
I don't know. I don't know.
Uh,
Just move on to the next sketch, I guess. But we can't do that because the next sketch, with starring Jan Hooks, which I found under, it's axed from the episode on Peacock, and I don't know why,
yeah, it's this sketch called "Not an Actress,"
or
where
possibly sitcom actress. I've seen it under both titles
right,
on the reviews I found.
right. So basically, the premise is Jan Hooks plays this actress who is a former like child star, and Carl
Uh huh.
Weathers is like her agent.
Who's kind of like her pimp,
Right.
and Phil Hartman is playing her blind date, and when he finds out that she was an actress in sitcoms, he becomes less interested in her, and I don't know. I mean, we've only read about this sketch. We haven't watched this sketch, so
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not on Peacock, like you said. It probably was on this archive.org, which was this website where you could find all these old SNL episodes, but they kind of took them all off recently.
right,
Uh,
because they were not there legally, I don't believe.
don't think so. So this one's
Yeah.
kind of hard to find. Maybe you can find it on the dark web or something, but it's a bummer we're not able to see it because this one was written by Bonnie and Terry Turner, who,
Hmm.
of course, as you know, went on to write Wayne's World and Wayne's World 2. What was it, right? The Coneheads movie, and then they
Hmm.
went on to create Third Rock from the Sun and that '70s show. So it would have
Yeah,
been,
and I mean, yeah, and they were big SNL writers for a number of years.
yeah, for
So,
sure. This would have been cool to
and
see, but
it's a showcase for Jan Hooks, and she's without this sketch, she's barely in this episode. She's in the mother-in-law sketch. That's about it, I believe.
yeah,
And yeah,
all right. But who
sorry
knows?
you couldn't see this. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because of the music rights thing or what. I I don't know. I can't imagine it aging worse than the mother-in-law sketch.
Yeah,
So
that was a well. Speaking of aging poorly, Master Thespian.
Master Thespian.
Thank you.
This this episode, wow.
Yeah, it was a different time, man. All right.
It wasn't that long. I mean, we're going on 35, 40 years ago now, but wow.
It was a different time, John. So yeah, this sketch was written by A. Whitney Brown and John Lovitz. It's John Lovitz's Master Thespian character.
Right. Who is this big, flamboyant John Barrymore-like actor?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he talks in big flourishing terms, and he uses big big terminology, and it's just very kind of full of himself.
And his catchphrase was acting, and then the other character would respond genius and thank you, and
like a stereotypical.
You had to be there, I think.
Like a stereotypical actor of the past, who's also like extremely vain and arrogant, but at the same time very insecure.
And very hammy and very flamboyant and over the top, and he was smoking Jack and ascot and all that.
Right.
And this was like one of SNL's hit characters at the time.
Yeah. No, I remember this being done numerous times. Like I know they did this when Glenn Close hosted, and John Lithgow hosted, and they brought this.
I remember him with John Lithgow. Yeah, I mean this was one of the very first SNL recurring characters that they absolutely drove into the ground.
The first of a proud tradition.
Now, I mean, this and Church Lady, these were the characters that we were getting inundated with back in the day. I don't think I ever got sick of Church Lady. I think I might have gotten a little sick of Master Thespian.
I think it's weird. They've kind of found new ways to bring up Church Lady sketches and like really kind of really explore the space. But so that people weren't getting sick of them, which I appreciate.
Well, Church Lady, I think, was better built for commenting on the current events of the day.
Yeah, like I still remember that one where Rob Lowe hosted, and it was just after
his scandal.
Yeah, and it ended with Church Lady spanking him with a paddle. I was like,
and he had Jim and Tammy Faye Baker on after Jim Baker's affair was exposed. And, I mean, it was just better built to comment on current events. So I think that worked well in Church Lady's favor, and I think also Dana Carvey was able to give Church Lady a lot more colors than John Lovitz could Master Thespian. Master Thespian was really just built around that one gag.
Right.
So
in this sketch, we see the Master Thespian backstage in his dressing room, and he's getting ready to perform. He's just been casted in Othello, but he's upset because he didn't get the lead role of Othello. He's playing Iago, and the lead role of Othello is being played by Chin Hua, who is a 70-year-old Chinese actor.
Right.
And Chin Hua knocks on his door to introduce himself. In comes Carl Weathers.
Carl Weathers in costume as Othello, the Moor of Venice.
Right. And of course, like Master Thespian is thrown back. It's like, wait, I thought you were a 70-year-old Chinese guy. And he's like, nope, makeup and acting. It's
acting. He's also very melodramatic. And Master Thespian, because he's very jealous, he points out that Chinua won't be recognized in the role of Othello because he's thrown himself into the role so much. And so he begins giving him 3 pieces of advice. Number 1 is you're too subtle. And number 2 is you must be yourself. And you must be yourself so that you can get credit for this role and what you're doing and what you're bringing to it.
Right. And of course that plays into the vanity of Chin Hua. It's like, yes, of course. How will people know? How will people give me my accolades if they don't see me and know it's me?
Right.
So, playing on, again, vanity of actors. It's very common trope.
Right.
So then we see Carl Weathers step out of the dressing room to remove all the quote-unquote makeup and prosthetics.
Right. And we hear like lots of crashing and stuff backstage. There's like some backstage noise. I'm like, is he supposed to like be suffering some accident or something?
Yeah, like that's not how people get dressed. Like,
yeah, I don't know. And then it's weird. And then they have Dana Carvey come in, has the real Chinese Chen Hua, and it's Dana Carvey in yellow face.
Yeah, like if you've seen Breakfast at Tiffany's, it's that.
Yeah, and it's Dana Carvey doing his go-to Asian character voice where he had that character, the chicken make lousy house pet guy.
Oh wow, I haven't thought
Do you
about
remember that character? I don't remember the name of this character. I was listening to an episode of the Fly on the Wall podcast with Dana Carvey and David Spade, and Dana Carvey was saying like, yeah, oh yeah, we would never do this character today, but
yeah, that
but
was woo. This was a hot one.
Yeah, and and he comes out, and I mean, it's Dana Carvey in yellowface, and he's doing his stock Asian character accent. Whew.
Oh boy. I will admit there is a funny joke earlier on in the sketch where where the master thespian is talking to himself saying, "Oh my god, this guy's a great actor. I'll be outshined. He'll outact me." And he's like kind of talking to himself. And then Chinhua is saying, "Who are you talking to?" And he says, "My agent." And Chinhua says, "Well, there's no one there." And then he says, "Oh, no wonder I'm not getting any work."
Yeah,
right. That's like a nice little
that's a good line.
It's almost like a line. Yeah, it's almost like a Marx Brothers type of line or something like
that. Yeah, I can see that.
But yeah, this sketch, oh boy. I believe the word is fraught.
Yeah, I mean, this is just another one where it's just pretty impossible to separate this from the year we're looking at it in and look at it in the context of its time. Where, I'm sure when I watched this in 1988, I wouldn't have seen anything objectionable about it. It was just like, oh yeah, Dana Carvey comes in yellowface at the end. What the heck? Yeah. I saw Joe Gray do that in Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins just a few years ago.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
That's what they do, my friend. That's what they do. And so that sketch, all right.
That was a thing that existed.
And then we end on this interesting pre-tape, this short film called The Garden, written by Nora Dunn, directed by Tom Radke.
Radke, yeah. Filmed in black and white. And it's Nora Dunn. She's a hairdresser, and we kind of learned that the summary I found, it says, she turns her clients into art projects after they die. I don't know. My attention wanders in this sketch because it's telling us rather than showing us.
Yeah, this kind of reminded me like an avant-garde type of student film.
Yeah,
a little bit like something an NYU student would have made. Mm-hmm. It reminded me of like that because, like you said, like it's all black and white. In the opening, we see like a woman talking to the camera saying, "Oh my god, that I own that building, and when I rented it out to that woman, it was supposed to be a hairdresser, but she's doing sick, crazy things in there, and I don't like it. And I'm going to call the police. It's a legal matter now." And then they cut to Nora Dunn, and like she's kind of going on about her husband who passed away. Yeah, and like then she's talking about,
and she's doing this character voice, and she's sort of supposed to, she kind of reminded me a little of Edith Head, who Edna Mode from The Incredibles, that was based on Edith Head, the famous Hollywood costume designer. I don't know if she was doing Edith Head or she was doing something else, but I don't know. This was weird, man.
It's a weird one for sure. It's very odd. It's
I mean, it's not funny.
No, it's more.
I don't know what she was going for. I just thought it was pretty awful.
It's definitely not funny. I mean, some people might find it interesting. It's definitely odd because, like you said, like they're talking about death a lot and people that have died in the woman's life. Like apparently, one of her clients died under the hairdryer, and then one of the clients.
And they say we didn't notice for a while because the pages of her magazine were still turning, but that was just the air from the hairdryer.
Yeah, and then she goes on to say one of the client's dog died, so then Nora Dunn's character dressed her up, and it's implied, like you said, that she takes the dead people and makes them into art projects, but we don't see them, and she never comes forward and says that's what she's doing.
We're just hearing about it. We're not seeing anything, and Nora Dunn is the only cast member in this thing. The rest of the people are just played by these character actors that we've never seen nor heard of before.
Yeah, like this is definitely.
So it just seems like this weird ego trip for Nora Dunn. This
is a Nora joint for sure. Yeah. And I they never really explain why this film is called The Garden. Because, like, I think, well, are the art pieces in that garden, or is she burying these dead
I
people
don't
and
know.
dog
Like
in the garden?
I watched this the first time and my attention really wandered the first time. And then I was like, okay, I better watch this again and pay more attention. And I lasted a little longer. And then by the end, my attention is still wandering because it's just dull. It's just this ponderous, pretentious thing. I don't know.
I'd agree. It is pretty.
Like, I mean, from what I understand, like Nora Dunn, I think she dated Lorne Michaels for a while, and
Oh,
this feels like she just got something on because she was in with Lorne. You
I didn't
know?
know that. Wow. Hey.
Haven't you read the oral history?
I did, but I might have forgotten oral history.
Yeah,
I did, but I might have forgotten about that part.
yeah,
Wow. But yeah, this does kind of seem a little pretentious, a little like again, art house
yeah.
avant
It seemed a
garde.
lot pretentious to me. I
Yeah.
just thought this was awful. I was like, how the f did this make the show? What the hell, man?
Yeah, it's definitely more weird than funny. If
Yeah,
you're the type of person that finds things like this kind of interesting, maybe you'll dig it more than I did. But I was like, all right, this is something, but I don't know what they're trying to say here. But I mean, I guess at
yeah,
the end she does say like there's beauty in death and death and beauty. I guess it's in a little bit like kind of pretentious and kind of navel gazy type of art house type of bullshit. But yeah, I was just
yeah.
like,
I totally get why it was buried at the end of the show. I think it should have been axed before the live show. I'm just like, this is one of those things you're just like, how the f did this get on, man?
yeah. I mean, this is definitely something they would not do nowadays, but it probably shouldn't have
No,
been
this
done.
was yeah. Like this was like the tail end of the era when SNL would do like these short films that weren't really trying to be humorous. They would just be these weird things where they were just kind of disappearing up their own hindquarters,
Yeah,
and it's just weird, man.
yeah, just weird for the sake of being weird.
Yeah,
I mean, weird has its place. I won't say it doesn't, but I don't know. Yeah, this didn't really do it for me.
did nothing for me.
Hmm.
No, yeah,
And
and weird one to leave off on because that's the last sketch of the night.
yeah, that's the episode, guys.
Um,
Overall, I mean, I thought Carl Weathers did a great job as a host.
Yeah. Carl Weathers said goodnight. He had a funny line. I don't know if it was intentionally funny. He says, Robbie Robertson was hot and everybody at Saturday Night Live was live, which just sounds like damning them with fate praise, you know?
Phil Hartman's like, hey, I was hot. Come on.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I thought Carl Weathers, he was a very energetic host, and I thought he was pretty good with what they called on him to do.
Right.
You know, he seemed game, which is the big thing I ask of any SNL host, and
Yeah.
they never brought him back. This was his one and only time hosting the show.
Yeah. I feel like that's a mistake. I feel they should have brought him back. They could have brought him back. I don't know why they didn't.
Well, it could be as something as simple as he just never had a big enough project to bring him back. You know,
Yeah, probably.
because I mean, which Rocky movie was he killed off in? The fourth one?
He was
He,
killed.
he was killed by Ivan Drago,
Yeah,
right?
so Rocky 4, I Must Break You.
Was that what year was that Rocky for? Like 86, 88? Something like
I'd
that.
have to go back in the archives and look that up, boss. But yeah, it sounds about right.
Yeah, let me see. Rocky
Ugh.
for 1985. Okay, so he was done with the Rocky movies for quite some time by this point. So
Yeah.
yeah, and he'd already done Predator, and yeah, so this was
This was
probably about as high as his star ever rose. I
yeah, like
suppose.
around this time he was. I think we talked about it off mic. He was here. He was probably here promoting Action Jackson because he was
Hmm.
hoping that would be the thing that would launch him into A-list, and unfortunately never
Yeah,
quite did.
yeah. That I've never seen that movie. I know that was his big to be a big action star, and I don't think he ever really got another shot after that to be a leading man.
Yeah,
So
unfortunately, he had what it took. I don't know why he didn't get another shot, but it's a bummer. He's still but he's still well remembered, still well regarded and beloved.
mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, I saw a lot of affection for him on social media when he passed it a couple weeks ago, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I think he's one of those
and
actors that like a lot of people in different like generations remember. Like older
hmm
people remember him from Rocky, and Predator.
yeah,
Gen Xers like us remember him from Happy Gilmore. Younger people remember him
hmm
from Mandalorian. Like he kind of hit on all the generations.
yeah. He seemed to have something like once every decade or so that really cemented him in the pop culture of the time.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely.
So that's, I mean, that's a pretty damn good career, particularly for a sports star turned actor.
Yeah, absolutely. Like usually when you hear about a sports actor turn or a sports an athlete, that's the word,
hmm
an athlete turned actor, it unless they're a wrestler, it usually doesn't go that great. I can't think of too many athletes who went on to like a promising, flourishing like acting career, other than
hmm
other than wrestlers. But like the fact that he got as far as he did is pretty impressive.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and on
So, but, whew, I mean, very surprised. I think my overall takeaway was very surprised at how badly some of the stuff in this episode aged, man.
yeah, it's sometimes, hey man, we remember the past more fondly than it actually
Yeah.
was, and yeah, this definitely the rose-colored glasses came off this episode, but we still love the early '80s just because it's the one that kind of started us on the
Late
SNL
80s.
path. Late, what did I say?
You said early 80s.
Oh, well, early '80s were nice too, but yes, late '80s because it's the era that started us on the path to loving SNL, and
Yeah, I mean, and it was fun to like see revisit sketches that I remembered. Like I still have fond memories of Handy Off. That's very funny.
mm,
That if I had to pick a sketch. Well, no, I couldn't really name that a sketch of the night because that was a rerun from another episode. So I guess if I had to pick the sketch of the night, probably the Democratic debate sketch.
that was a good. Yeah, I would say that's good.
And this was like I found it exceptional to read that this was their first political debate sketch since the original cast, and that really sort of pointed the way forward because SNL got a lot more political after this,
Yeah,
and I think that's the influence of writers like Al Franken and Tom Davis and Jim Downey who were
yeah,
who are much more political.
yeah, for sure. I think that's what the show's missing now. Is somebody like a writer who's more adept to like writing political humor. I think.
hmm
I mean, we kind of have that. Actually, we don't really have that now because like all the political humor, it's kind of that we have in today's episodes. They're always kind of like a little niche thing, or like they always kind of hit on the same note. Like Biden is old and Trump is
Yeah,
crazy and racist, and that's it. And then like, there's not much. I feel like there's more
I'd love
meat
to
on the
see
bone
more.
that the people aren't
Yeah,
getting.
I'd love to see more creative premises in the political humor these days, like the classic sketch where I think it was called Ronald Reagan Mastermind, where
Mm.
the premise was, Phil Hartman was playing Ronald Reagan, and he's like sort of the lovable, doddering guy in public, and he's like, "Oh well, congratulations on selling all those Girl Scout cookies. If you're such a good sales lady, I could use you in Washington D.C." And then he's like convening a war room thing in between all that other stuff, and then he's like, now I got to do this nonsense.
Yeah.
Just and it's making the point that like Reagan was probably smarter and shrewder and more devious than we gave him credit for.
Yeah. That's a great
Um,
sketch. I remember that.
I mean, that's a great sketch because it had a real point of view and it had a real point to make. And I don't know how true that was in retrospect. Who knows? But I miss political humor like that, where would they would take something and they push it into the realm of absurdity. And I think that's something that's kind of missing from the show today.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's definitely something missing. Who knows? Maybe in SNL 50 we'll get some new writers and that'll bring that to uh, bring that to the show. But yeah,
Yeah,
definitely missing.
yeah, and but it was also funny. I mean, there were bits in this episode that had aged horribly, but there were also things like commenting on Israel and Palestine, where it's like, oh well, this is still depressingly current, and like when they were
Oh,
pulling out the guns in the mother-in-law sketch, I was like, oh, are we going to do a gun sketch? Because this is still obviously an issue today, if not more so.
oh,
Um, we still have underwhelming political candidates.
yeah. The more things
Uh,
change, the more they say the same.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was interesting to revisit from this era.
Yeah, it's like, oh wow, this is very current.
Yeah. But also, I mean, heck, even the Wile E. Coyote joke during Weekend Update, like all over social media this week, was the fact that the Coyote versus Acme movie has been canceled.
Yeah,
and Will Forte was one of the featured actors in that.
Yeah, that's weird that movie's never going to see the light of day. That's
Yeah.
Warner Brothers, what the fuck are you doing?
I don't know. Anyway,
but that's our episode, guys. Actually, we put out the word that we were going to do this episode on the Twitter, and we did get a response.
Yeah. Our friend Boardman gets paid. Let's see what he had to say.
He says, "R.I.P. to Mr. Weathers. One of my favorite movies of all time are the Rocky movies.
Except Rocky V.
Except Rocky. Yeah, no one likes Rocky V. That seems to be the general consensus. And he was brilliant. Action Jackson was very underrated, and because of Mr. Weathers, I never throw a bone away because I'll always have some stew."
Yeah, you save that bone, you get some stew going.
I love the way he said it. He seemed really excited about that stew.
Yeah,
it's like you got to get yourself a stew.
Carl Weathers in Arrested Development, so funny. I mean, that was really gave me my most affection for him, because like I haven't watched The Mandalorian. I'm just not much of a Star Wars fan these days. I'm never watched Happy Gilmore back in the day, and not much of a Adam Sandler fan. So yeah, when I see Carl Weathers, I think Arrested Development. That's my Carl Weathers.
Right. So guys, make yourself a stew in Carl Weathers' honor.
That's right. Yeah.
Get a stew going.
Get yourself a broth, some potatoes, some carrots, and some chicken bones, and get yourself a good stew going.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's our episode, guys. Thanks again for listening, as always, to the podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, because we refuse to call it X, at SNL Nerd Show. And you can follow me on all the social platforms at Darren Credible, DARIN. Credible.
And you can follow me on the social platforms at Trumbull Comic, TRUMBULL, and the word comic. And next week, SNL is off again, so we got to do another Phil week. Mm-hmm. What are we going to do, Darren? What should we do? It's still February. What do we do? Valentine's Day is coming up. Mm-hmm. Super Bowl will be over by the time we record our next episode. Mm-hmm. What can we do? What else is going on in February? What can we do?
Well, let's sing the praises of the black people, John, because on the next...
I enjoy singing the praises of the black people, as you put it.
I was going to say the black man, but then I was like, I should include black women.
Just as long as you don't say the blacks, because that doesn't sound good.
Black men, women, they, thems, all of them. Because on the next SNL Nerds, we're going to talk about we're going to celebrate Black History Month and talk about all the sketches that surround black people and race. It'll be like a hodgepodge of a show, a mix
featuring a lot of we're going to comment on a lot of the sketches that they've done about the black experience in America. Let's say that
the diaspora, the oeuvre.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're definitely going to talk about Black Jeopardy. We're going to talk about White Like Me. We're gonna we're even going to talk about the Richard Pryor Chevy Chase word association sketch.
Honky honky. Yeah.
Yeah. Dead honky.
Dead honky. Yeah. Yeah.
Woo. And that one is going to be, if you thought what we watched today was fraud, that one was oh boy.
I mean, that's a famous sketch, and it still pops up in the best of shows. But we'll get into it next week. I don't want to jump the gun and start talking about it now. But yeah, that's a very memorable sketch.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah. So that tune in next week. We'll be talking all about those sketches for Black History Month. But until then, nerds out.
This has been a non-productive media presentation. Executive producer Frank Hablawi. This program and many others like it on the Non-Productive Network is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Please share it, but ask before trying to change it or sell it. For more information, visit non-productive.com.